I only touched my father's pocket watch, the last thing that still smelled of his workshop sawdust and machine oil, when the hand of the man my mother calls husband struck my face. He accused me of stealing, but what he didn't know was this. That watch doesn't just measure time, it measures truth. And when I opened the back case, every tiny engraved number pulled an entire conspiracy into the light, one that would drag our whole family into court. My name is Nora Hale, and at 34, I never imagined I'd be living under someone else's rules in what used to be my childhood home. But here I was, a compliance nurse investigator at Cypress Glen Pediatric Hospital, temporarily back in Northbridge, Ohio, counting every dollar until I could afford my own place again. The divorce had cleaned me out. Legal fees, splitting assets, starting over. It all adds up faster than a medical bill. So when Mom offered the spare room, I swallowed my pride and packed my boxes. What I didn't fully grasp was that accepting her offer meant accepting Wallace Creed's dominion. Wallace, even thinking his name made my jaw clench. He'd married my mother Lorraine 3 years ago, and in that time, he'd transformed our family home into his personal kingdom. Every surface bore his mark. His magazines fanned across the coffee table, his shoes lined up by the door, his voice echoing through rooms that once rang with my father's laughter. "House rules," he'd announced my first night back, sliding a laminated sheet across the dinner table, curfews, cleaning schedules, even regulations about shower duration. I was a grown woman with a master's degree and a decade of experience investigating medical compliance violations. Yet here I sat, being handed a bedtime like a teenager. The real slap came with the financial arrangements. Wallace controlled everything. The household accounts, Mom's Social Security checks, even the grocery money. His daughter Tessa and her husband Mark lived rent-free in the converted garage apartment, while I was charged $400 monthly for my childhood bedroom. Market rate, Wallace called it, though we all knew similar rooms in Northbridge rented for half that. I paid without argument, every week. I transferred the money, documenting each transaction in my personal spreadsheet. My colleagues at the hospital would have recognized the behavior. It's what we do when building a case. Document everything, create a paper trail, wait for the right moment. Mom had changed too. The woman who once stood up to hospital administrators when Dad was sick now deferred to Wallace on everything. "He's just particular," she'd say when I questioned the rules. "He likes things organized." But I saw how she flinched when his voice rose, how she checked with him before spending $20 on groceries. The house felt different without Dad. Daniel Hale had been gone just over a year, and his absence left more than empty spaces. It left questions. His workshop in the basement stood locked now, Wallace claiming insurance purposes. The oak desk where he'd taught me to balance a checkbook had been replaced with Wallace's particle board computer station. And then there was the matter of the pocket watch. Dad's Patek Philippe pocket watch, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations, had vanished after the funeral. When I'd asked about it during the estate settlement, everyone acted confused. The lawyer shuffled papers. Mom changed the subject. Wallace declared he'd never seen it. "Must have been misplaced in all the chaos," the estate attorney had suggested. Though we both knew Dad kept that watch in the same drawer for 30 years. It was worth more than money to our family. Dad used to let me wind it every Sunday, teaching me about patience, precision, and the value of time well spent. Now I marked time differently. Each day in Wallace's house was a checkbox on my escape plan. Each paycheck brought me closer to freedom. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, investigated other people's violations while ignoring the ones happening under my own roof. But the thing about being a compliance investigator is that you develop instincts. You learn to spot patterns, irregularities, the small lies that point to bigger deceptions, and everything about Wallace Creed set off my professional alarm bells. The way he monitored the mail, his insistence on handling all of Mom's financial matters, the locked rooms and changed locks and missing heirlooms. I was building a case, even if I didn't fully realize it yet. Every strange rule, every financial control, every dismissive explanation, I filed it all away in the back of my mind, creating a mental database of red flags. Living in that house was like being a stranger in my own history, but I was patient. In my work, I'd learned that the most damning evidence often surfaces when violators think no one's watching. So I watched, I waited, I paid my rent, and followed the rules and pretended not to notice when things didn't add up. Because something was definitely not adding up in the Creed household. And once I found that watch, wherever Wallace had hidden it, I had a feeling the numbers would finally start making sense. The discovery happened on a Thursday evening in March. I was clearing dinner plates, another of Wallace's rules. Whoever cooks doesn't clean. When Tessa called him to the garage apartment about some plumbing issue, Mom was watching her evening shows, that glazed look in her eyes that had become too familiar. Wallace's home office door stood ajar. Normally, he locked it religiously, even for bathroom breaks, but in his haste to attend to his precious daughter's crisis, he'd forgotten. I carried the plates past, glancing inside. His desk lamp was still on, illuminating neat stacks of papers and his prized collection of vintage pen holders. I should have walked on, should have loaded the dishwasher and retreated to my room like always. But something made me pause. Maybe it was investigator's instinct, or maybe just the accumulated weight of 13 weeks under his roof. I set the plates on the hall table and stepped inside. The office smelled like his cologne, something expensive and oppressive. I didn't touch anything at first, just observed. File folders labeled with Mom's name, bank statements, investment summaries, all the financial documents he kept locked away from the woman whose money they represented. Then I saw the mahogany box. It sat in his desk drawer, partially open. Inside, cushioned in burgundy velvet, lay my father's pocket watch. The Patek Philippe gleamed under the desk lamp, its gold case catching the light exactly as it had when Dad would check it during Sunday dinners. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. The weight felt right. The inscription was there. D.H. in elegant script, Daniel Hale. I turned it over, ran my thumb across the familiar scratches on the back, pressed the crown to hear that distinctive click. This was it, the watch that had supposedly vanished, that no one could locate during probate, that had been written off as lost. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Wallace's voice hit me like cold water. He stood in the doorway, face flushed, fists clenched. Behind him, Tessa peered over his shoulder with a smirk that suggested the plumbing emergency had been remarkably short-lived. "This is my father's watch," I said, keeping my voice level, professional. "The one that went missing after his funeral." "Put it down," he stepped forward. "That's mine. Bought it at an estate sale last month. It has his initials. Lots of people have those initials. Put it down." I should have complied. Should have placed it back and retreated, gathered more evidence, built a stronger case, but holding that watch, feeling its familiar weight, remembering Dad's hands winding it, something in me snapped. No. The blow came faster than I expected, not a closed fist. Wallace was too calculating for that, but a sharp, open-handed strike that sent me stumbling sideways. The watch flew from my hand, clattering across the hardwood floor. "Thief!" He grabbed my arm, fingers digging deep. "Coming into my office, taking my property." "Wallace!" Mom appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "What's happening?" "Your daughter is stealing from me. Lorraine. Caught her red-handed going through my desk." I pressed my free hand to my burning cheek, tasting copper where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. "Mom, it's Dad's watch. Look at it. You know that watch." She glanced at the floor where it had fallen, then back to Wallace. Wallace, maybe there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." His grip tightened. "She's a thief. Always has been entitled. Always thought she was better than everyone. Well, not in my house." Tessa had retrieved the watch, making a show of examining it. "Definitely looks like the one you bought at that estate sale. Dad, I remember you showing me." The lie was so smooth, so rehearsed. They'd prepared for this possibility. "I'm calling the police," Wallace announced. "Let them sort out—" "Yes," I interrupted. my compliance investigator training kicking in. Let's definitely call the police. I'm sure they'll be very interested in how my father's missing heirloom ended up in your locked desk drawer. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Calculation? He released my arm with a shove that sent me against the wall. Get out of my office. In fact, get out of my house. You have 1 hour to pack. Wallace, no, Mom protested weakly. She's my daughter. Who just assaulted me in attempted theft. 1 hour, or I press charges. I straightened, my cheek throbbing, arm already showing the red marks that would purple by morning. But I felt strangely calm, clear. This was evidence. This was documentation. I'll leave, I said quietly. But first, I'm going to the emergency room for documentation of injuries. As a medical professional, I'm sure you understand the importance of proper documentation. Wallace. His face went pale. Tessa's smirk faltered. I pulled out my phone, swiping to the voice recorder I always kept handy for work notes. It had been running since I'd entered his office, another investigator's habit. And I'll be filing a police report for assault and for the theft of my father's watch, which I'm sure will be thoroughly investigated. You were trespassing. In my mother's home, where I pay rent, with a written lease agreement, I smiled tightly. You did insist on proper paperwork, remember? The room fell silent except for the ticking of Wallace's pretentious grandfather clock. Mom looked between us, lost and frightened. Tessa clutched the watch, no longer seeming quite so confident. 1 hour, Wallace repeated, but his voice had lost its edge. I nodded, already backing toward the door. Mom, would you please take photos of my face and arm for the medical documentation? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The flash illuminated Wallace's office 3 times, capturing the swelling cheek, the finger marks on my arm, the scene of the confrontation. I left them there, Wallace rigid with rage, Tessa calculating damage control, Mom looking like she might shatter. I had packing to do, police reports to file, evidence to preserve, and a watch to reclaim. The emergency room at Cypress Glen knew me well, though usually I was there investigating incidents, not documenting my own. Dr. Sarah Winters, a colleague who'd worked with me on several compliance cases, handled my examination personally. Nora, these bruises, she photographed each mark meticulously. The pattern suggests defensive wounds as well as assault. I need everything documented to chain of custody standards, I said. This is going to court. 2 hours later, with a thick medical file and police report number in hand, I sat in my temporary motel room, studying photos on my phone. Not just the injury documentation. I'd managed to capture several shots of the watch before Wallace struck me. The serial number was partially visible in one image. That's when I remembered Thomas Brennan. The old watchmaker still operated his shop on Mercy Lane, a narrow store squeezed between a defunct print shop and a vape store. Dad had taken the Patek there annually for service. If anyone could verify the watch's provenance, it would be Brennan. I arrived at his shop the next morning, my face a palette of purple and green despite the concealer. Brennan took one look at me and ushered me to his back workshop without a word. Miss Hale, he said, adjusting his jeweler's loop. I heard about your father. Fine man. I'm sorry. Thank you. I showed him the photos. Mr. Brennan, this is his watch. Can you confirm it? He studied the images carefully, then pulled out a leather-bound ledger. Every Patek that comes through my shop gets logged. Serial number, service dates, distinguishing marks. His gnarled finger traced down entries dating back decades. Here, November 2019, last service, serial number ending in 4827. My pulse quickened. That matches what I can see in the photo. But there's more. He disappeared into a back room, returning with a small envelope. Your father asked me to hold this, said if anything happened to him, and if you came asking about the watch, I should give it to you. Inside was a brass key and a note in Dad's careful handwriting. Nora, the watch opens more than time. Trust the numbers. D.H. Mr. Brennan, have you ever opened the back case, beyond the normal service access? He peered at me over his wire-rimmed glasses. Your father specifically requested I never open the secondary compartment. Said it was family business. Secondary compartment. My investigator's instincts sharpened. But you could? If I had the watch? With the right tools, yes. It's an old Patek feature. A hidden space beneath the movement. Collectors call it a secret signature compartment. I thanked him and left with the key and a notarized statement about the watch's service history. My next stop was Martin Keene's law office. Keene and Alder occupied a converted Victorian near the courthouse. Martin himself was pushing 70, with the careful precision of someone who'd spent 50 years navigating legal minefields. Nora, he stood when his secretary showed me in, his expression shifting when he saw my face. Good God, what happened? I gave him the condensed version, then placed the key on his desk. Dad left this with his watchmaker, said the watch opens more than time. I think there's something in a hidden compartment that relates to his estate. Martin studied the key, then pulled out a file thicker than it should have been for a simple estate. Your father was thorough, perhaps more than you know. He extracted a document. This is a codicil to his will, filed separately, witnessed by myself and my partner. It specifically bequeaths the watch to you upon reaching age 30. I'm 34. Yes, and the watch was supposed to be transferred to you 4 years ago. When I tried to execute this provision, I was told the watch was missing. By whom? Your mother and her new husband's attorney. The pieces were clicking together. What else does the codicil say? Martin adjusted his reading glasses. That the watch serves as a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank of Northbridge. The box contains, quote, documents and assets intended solely for my daughter Nora's financial security. My hand instinctively went to my bruised cheek. Wallace knew. It would appear so. The codicil was part of the probate filing, public record. If someone knew to look, or if someone's attorney told them to look. Martin leaned back. The question now is whether we can prove Mr. Creed deliberately concealed assets belonging to you. The watch itself is valuable, certainly, but if there are additional assets in that deposit box, he assaulted me when I found it. That suggests consciousness of guilt. Indeed it does, Martin smiled grimly. I think it's time we filed for an emergency injunction to prevent him from disposing of the watch. And perhaps we should have a conversation with the district attorney about theft by conversion. I thought about the brass key in my pocket, the secrets hidden in the watch's compartment, the bruises blooming across my skin. He's going to claim he bought it at an estate sale. Then he'll need to produce a receipt, a provenance, some proof of legitimate ownership. Martin's smile widened, which I'm betting he cannot do. His daughter will lie for him. She already has. Perjury is a serious offense, Miss Hale. Amazing how quickly stories change when witnesses face felony charges. I stood to leave, then paused. Martin, the safety deposit box. Can we access it without the watch? The bank's policies require both the key and the verification object specified in the rental agreement. In this case, that's the watch itself. Specifically, something in that hidden compartment your father mentioned. So Wallace hadn't just stolen a watch. He'd stolen my access to whatever Dad had left me. The assault wasn't just about being caught. It was about keeping me away from whatever was in that box. File the injunction, I said. And Martin, make sure it includes a provision for law enforcement to secure the watch immediately. I have a feeling Wallace is going to try to make it disappear. Already drafting it, he replied. Your father would be proud. Nora, you're fighting smart. As I left his office, I touched the key in my pocket. Dad's words echoed. Trust the numbers. In my profession, numbers told stories about fraud, about violations, about crimes people thought they'd hidden. Now it was time to make Wallace Creed's numbers tell theirs. Back in my motel room, I spread everything across the bed. Police reports, medical documentation, Brennan's notarized statement, the codicil, and printouts of Ohio statutes on theft by conversion. This was what I did best, building an airtight case from scattered evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your mother wants to talk. Please. I recognized Tessa's writing style. All fake politeness masking manipulation. I ignored it and opened my laptop. Time to apply my professional skills to personal matters. First, I created a timeline. Dad's death, the will reading, the watch's disappearance, Wallace's marriage to Mom. The dates told a story. Wallace had married Mom just 2 months after Dad's funeral, suspiciously close to when the estate's initial inventory was filed. Next, I dove into public records, property transfers, business filings, court documents. Wallace Creed had a history, 3 previous marriages, 2 bankruptcies, and a trail of civil suits, always the plaintiff, claiming various business partners had cheated him. The pattern was clear. Wallace was a serial financial predator. But it was the probate court's electronic filing system that yielded gold. As a compliance investigator, I knew how to track digital footprints. Every access to electronic court records left a trace. User ID, timestamp, documents viewed. The court's public terminal logs were obtainable through FOIA request, which I'd filed that afternoon. My phone rang. Mom. Nora, honey, please come home. He's calmed down. We can work this out. Mom, did you know about Dad's codicil? The one that specifically left me the watch? Silence. Then, quietly, Wallace said it was better to keep things simple, that the watch was just going to cause problems. Problems like me discovering what's in the safety deposit box? What safety deposit box? Her confusion sounded genuine. Mom, I need you to think carefully. After Dad died, did Wallace help you with the estate paperwork? Yes. He said it was too much for me to handle alone. He knew an attorney who could make things easier. Was that attorney's name Harrison Polk? A sharp intake of breath. How did you know? Because I'd just found Polk's name on 3 of Wallace's previous divorce proceedings. Mom, I need you to listen very carefully. Wallace has done this before. The pattern is always the same. Marry a recent widow. Take control of finances. Hidden assets mysteriously disappear. That's not... He wouldn't... I have the records right here. Barbara Simmons, married 2016, divorced 2018, after her late husband's coin collection vanished. Margaret Chen, married 2019, filed charges when her deceased spouse's investment portfolio was liquidated without her knowledge. Stop. Her voice was small. Please stop. He's using you, Mom, and when he's drained everything he can, he'll move on to the next widow. The line went dead. I returned to my research, pulling up everything I could find on the Hale Education Trust mentioned in the watchmaker's notes, buried in state corporation filings. I found it. A trust established by my father in 2015, with myself as sole beneficiary upon reaching age 30. The trust's tax ID number matched a series of investment accounts I found referenced in Dad's old emails. My secure work phone chimed. Detective Ray Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd worked together on several hospital fraud cases. Nora, got your injunction filing. Judge signed it an hour ago. We're heading to the Creed residence now to secure the watch. Want to meet us there? Absolutely. I arrived to find 2 patrol cars and an unmarked detective vehicle in the driveway. Wallace stood on the porch, red-faced and gesticulating wildly. Mom huddled behind him, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. This is harassment, Wallace shouted. I'll sue every one of you. Detective Morrison ignored him, turning to me. Ms. Hale, we need you to identify the watch when we locate it. He probably moved it, I said. Check his daughter's apartment, too. They're in this together. Morrison nodded to his team. Full search, both residences. It took them 40 minutes to find it. Not in Wallace's office. He was too smart for that. Not in Tessa's apartment either. They found it in Mom's jewelry box, wrapped in tissue paper, tucked between her wedding ring from Dad and a strand of pearls. Lorraine hid it for me, Wallace said quickly, to keep it safe. From her thieving daughter. Mom's face crumbled. I didn't... Wallace, I've never seen... The realization hit her like a physical blow. He'd planted it there, insurance, in case things went wrong, make the confused widow look complicit. "Is this your father's watch, Ms. Hale?" Morrison asked, holding up the evidence bag. I studied it carefully, checking the serial number against Brennan's documentation. Yes, serial number ending in 4827, the initials DH, are clearly visible. "Mr. Creed, you're under arrest for theft of property valued over $5,000 and filing a false police report." As Morrison read him his rights, I noticed Tessa filming with her phone from the garage apartment doorway. "Go ahead and record," I called to her. "Discovery works both ways." After Wallace was driven away, I approached Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "He put it in my jewelry box," she whispered, "to make me look guilty." "I know." "How long has he been planning this?" I chose my words carefully. "Probably since before Dad died. These men, they read obituaries like shopping lists. They look for vulnerable widows with estates to plunder." She finally looked at me, tears streaming. "Your father tried to protect us, the trust, the watch, all of it, and I let that man." "You were grieving. He took advantage. But Mom, I need you to be strong now. We're going to need your testimony about how he controlled the finances, how he manipulated the estate documents." She nodded slowly. "What's in the safety deposit box?" "I don't know yet, but Dad went to elaborate lengths to make sure only I could access it, which tells me Wallace knew it was valuable enough to steal." Tessa approached, no longer filming. "My father will destroy you for this." I smiled coldly. "Your father is facing 5 to 10 for grand larceny, and if you helped him, which I'm betting you did, conspiracy charges carry the same penalties." Her face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you didn't know that the plumbing emergency that night lasted exactly long enough for Wallace to catch me in his office." She retreated without another word. I turned back to Mom. "Pack a bag. You're staying with Aunt Susan tonight. Tomorrow. We meet with Martin Keene to start untangling what Wallace has done to your finances." "And the watch?" "Evidence for now. But once this is over, we'll get it back, and then we'll find out what Dad wanted me to know." As I helped Mom gather her things, I thought about patterns. In my work, I'd learned that financial predators were creatures of habit. They might vary their methods, but the core pattern remained consistent, and Wallace's pattern was about to become his undoing. The numbers would tell their story. They always did. Wallace made bail within 12 hours. Of course, men like him always had money squirreled away for emergencies, but I'd anticipated this. While he was being processed, I was setting my trap. The idea came from a case I'd investigated at the hospital. A facilities manager who'd been selling donated medical equipment. We'd caught him by tracking the serial numbers through resale sites. Wallace's greed would be his downfall, too. I met with Detective Morrison at the station. "I want to leak information," I said. "Controlled disinformation." He leaned back, intrigued. "I'm listening." "Wallace thinks he's smarter than everyone. He's probably planning to claim the watch as a replica, that the real one is still missing. But what if he hears the watch is worth even more than he thought?" "You want him to try selling it?" "He can't sell the one in evidence, but I'm betting he has connections to acquire a similar watch, or create a fake, to muddy the waters. If we leak that it's a rare Patek worth mid-six figures..." Morrison smiled. "He'll reach out to his network. We monitor the high-end estate dealers, auction houses." "Exactly. I have a cousin who writes for the Northbridge Gazette. One story about a $1 million heritage watch at the center of a theft case." "You've thought this through." "I investigate fraud for a living, detective. I know how these people think." The article ran 3 days later. My cousin outdid herself. Breathless prose about the exceedingly rare Patek Philippe with unique complications, potentially worth $800,000 to collectors. She even quoted an anonymous expert, actually me, disguising my voice, explaining the watch's special features. Then we waited. I spent those days with Martin Keene, unraveling Wallace's financial manipulations. The scope was staggering. He'd convinced Mom to sign power of attorney, had transferred her CDs to joint accounts, had even taken out a home equity line of credit. "Your mother's lucky," Martin said. "Another 6 months and he'd have stripped everything." On day 4, Morrison called. "Got a hit. Parkway Estate buyers received an inquiry about authenticating a Patek Philippe pocket watch. Guess who made the appointment?" "Not Wallace himself?" "Too smart for that. But the appointment is under Tessa Creed Larson." The sting was almost anticlimactic. Tessa walked into Parkway Estate buyers carrying a leather presentation case. The watch inside was obviously fake. Decent quality. But the serial number was wrong. The weight off by grams. She spun a story about inheriting it from her grandfather, needing quick cash for medical bills. The store owner, briefed by police, played along perfectly. He examined the watch with great ceremony, took photos, ran the serial number through the police database as standard procedure for high-value items. The system flagged immediately. Watch reported stolen. Serial number, albeit incorrect, associated with active criminal case. Tessa tried to leave. "I must have been mistaken. This was my grandfather's, not the one in the news." "Ma'am, I need you to wait while we verify." She bolted, or tried to. Officers were already positioned outside. In the interrogation room, faced with conspiracy charges, Tessa folded like a cheap suit. Yes, Wallace had asked her to test the market. Yes, she knew about the real watch. Yes, she'd helped him hide assets from other widows. He said they were all bitter ex-wives trying to take his money. She whined to the detective. "I was just protecting my father." But the real revelation came when they searched her phone. Text messages, dozens of them. Wallace instructing her to access court records, to watch for specific filings, including one from the night before Dad's watch was discovered. Check probate amendments for Hale. Look for anything about watches or safety deposits. And her reply, "Found it. Codicil filed separately. Watch is a key. Should I print?" "Delete after reading," Wallace had responded. But Tessa, thankfully, was terrible at covering her tracks. Morrison showed me the messages in his office. "This proves premeditation. He knew exactly what he was stealing and why." "It's more than that," I said, studying the timestamps. "Look at the date of the first message about checking probate records. 3 weeks before he married my mother." Morrison whistled low. He was planning this before the wedding. "He married her specifically to get access to my father's estate, to that watch, to whatever's in that safety deposit box." "Any idea what that might be?" I thought about Dad, his careful planning, his love of puzzles. My father started a tech company in the 90s, sold his shares early, before it went public. He always said he put the money away for my education, but I got scholarships, never needed it. "How much are we talking about?" "He sold for $50,000 in 1998. That company is now worth billions. Even early shares would be valued at enough to make Wallace risk everything. Enough to make him target my mother, manipulate the estate, steal from his own wife's daughter." I stood. "Detective, I need that watch released to me. Not permanently. I know it's evidence, but I need 1 hour with it and Thomas Brennan." Morrison considered. "I'll need to be present. Chain of custody." "Of course." That afternoon, in Brennan's workshop with Morrison watching, the old watchmaker carefully opened the primary back case. Beneath the mechanism, nearly invisible, was a hairline seam. "There," Brennan murmured. The secondary compartment. Using specialized tools, he worked for 20 minutes before the tiny panel clicked open. Inside was a strip of paper, rolled tight. I unrolled it with shaking hands. Numbers, just numbers, but I recognized the format. Routing and account numbers, and below them, a single phrase. "Trust the process. Love, Dad." "Bank codes?" Morrison asked. "Better. Trust account verification. These numbers prove I'm the beneficiary of the Hale Education Trust. Without them, even with ID, the bank won't release information." I looked at Wallace's watch, my father's watch, ticking steadily in Brennan's careful hands, every tick a choice. Dad used to say, Every choice a chance to do right. Charge him, I told Morrison. Grand theft, fraud, conspiracy, everything you can make stick. With pleasure. As we prepared to leave, I asked Brennan to close the watch back up. Evidence was evidence, but I'd gotten what I needed. The numbers that would unlock whatever my father had hidden away. Wallace thought he was stealing a watch. He'd actually stolen the key to his own destruction. The numbers never lie, and these numbers were about to bury him. The courtroom smelled of old wood and anxiety. 6 months after that night in Wallace's office, we finally had our day. Actually, days. The prosecutor had combined the criminal charges with the probate dispute, creating what Judge Patricia Holcomb called an efficient resolution to interconnected matters. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Martin Keene. My bruises, long faded but documented in graphic photos, entered as Exhibit A. Across from us, Wallace hunched beside his attorney, not Harrison Polk, who'd fled the state when subpoenaed, but a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The state calls Thomas Brennan. The old watchmaker took the stand with dignity, his service records in hand. Under the prosecutor's careful questioning, he established the watch's provenance beyond doubt, every service, every repair, the unique scratches and modifications that made this Patek Philippe absolutely, unquestionably, my father's. Mr. Brennan, the prosecutor continued, did you assist in opening a hidden compartment in this watch? I did, at Ms. Hale's request, with Detective Morrison present. And what did you find? Account numbers, hidden by Mr. Daniel Hale, according to the note. Wallace's attorney tried to object, but Judge Holcomb was having none of it. The defendant claimed he purchased this watch legitimately. The burden is on him to prove that claim. The prosecutor smiled. Speaking of which, the state calls Roger Whitman. Whitman owned Parkway Estate Buyers. His testimony was devastating. Not only had Tessa tried to sell a fake version of the watch, but his security footage showed Wallace himself lurking in a car outside during the attempted transaction. He was directing her by phone, Whitman testified. You can see her checking her cell every few seconds, nodding, then changing her story. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. The state calls Margaret Rousseau. I didn't recognize the name until a small, steel-haired woman took the stand. Then it clicked. Margaret Chen from my research. Remarried after divorcing Wallace. Mrs. Rousseau, the prosecutor began. Were you previously married to the defendant? 2 years. Worst 2 years of my life. Wallace's attorney objected. Judge Holcomb overruled. Margaret's testimony painted a familiar picture. Recent widow, charming suitor, quick marriage, financial manipulation. But she'd hired a forensic accountant when things felt wrong. He'd stolen $300,000 from my late husband's estate, she said flatly. Hid it in offshore accounts. Would have taken more, but I caught him. Objection! Wallace's lawyer was on his feet. Prior acts. Go to pattern and practice, the prosecutor countered. Shows defendant's modus operandi. I'll allow it. Wallace was sinking in his chair. Tessa, who'd pled guilty to conspiracy in exchange for testimony, hadn't even shown up. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The state calls Nora Hale. I took the stand, my hands steady on the Bible. The prosecutor walked me through that night, finding the watch, the confrontation, the assault. The photos of my injuries filled the courtroom screen, brutal in their high definition. Ms. Hale, what happened after you found the account numbers? I went to First National Bank with the probate attorney and Detective Morrison. Using the numbers from the watch, we accessed the Hale Education Trust. And what did you find? I looked directly at Wallace. Investment accounts valued at approximately $780,000. My father had purchased shares in his former company before it went public. He placed them in trust for my education and future. Gasps from the gallery. Mom, sitting behind me with Aunt Susan, made a small sound. The defendant knew about this? The messages on his daughter's phone prove he researched the trust before marrying my mother. He knew the watch was the key to accessing it. Wallace's attorney tried his best on cross-examination, but what could he argue? The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, text messages, financial records, multiple witnesses. When the defense rested without calling Wallace, never a good sign, I knew we'd won. Judge Holcomb didn't even retire to chambers for the civil portion. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Wallace Creed deliberately concealed and attempted to convert property belonging to Nora Hale. The watch in question is hereby returned to its rightful owner, along with all contents of the associated trust accounts. But she wasn't done. As to the criminal charges, given the evidence presented, this court finds probable cause for trial on all counts: grand theft, assault, fraud, and conspiracy. Bail is revoked. Defendant will be remanded to custody. The bailiff moved toward Wallace. He stood slowly, his face a mask of rage. "This isn't over," he snarled at me. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." As they cuffed him, I pulled out my father's watch, returned to me just minutes before. With the entire courtroom watching, I opened it, wound the mechanism, and held it to my ear. Tick, tick, tick. Every tick a choice, every choice a chance to do right. "Your Honor." Martin Keene stood. "There's one more matter. The defendant transferred significant assets from Mrs. Lorraine Hale's accounts. We're requesting immediate freeze and repatriation orders." "Granted. All accounts in the defendant's name or control are hereby frozen pending full forensic accounting." In the hallway afterward, Mom hugged me for the first time in months. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. "He protected us," I said, "even after he was gone." Detective Morrison approached, grinning. "Thought you'd want to know? Tessa just flipped completely. She's providing evidence about 2 other widows Wallace targeted. He's looking at 20 to 30 years. I held the watch up to the light, reading the inscription one more time. D.H. Daniel Hale, my father, who'd known that sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning, it's making sure they can never hurt anyone else again. That night, I sat in my new apartment, funded by the first disbursement from the trust. The watch sat on my desk, ticking steadily. I'd won. We'd won. The numbers had told their truth, just as I'd known they would. Wallace Creed had thought he was stealing time. Instead, he'd run out of it. The verdict came down on a Tuesday afternoon in September, almost exactly a year after I'd found the watch in Wallace's drawer. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the Widow Hunter case, as the media had dubbed it. I sat in the front row, the watch heavy in my jacket pocket. Mom was beside me, her hand gripping mine. Behind us, Margaret Russo and 2 other women Wallace had targeted, all there to see justice served. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Holcomb's voice carried absolute authority. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of grand theft, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of assault in the 2nd degree?" "Guilty." "On the charge of fraud?" "Guilty." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud?" "Guilty." 4 guilty verdicts. Wallace stood rigid as each one landed, his public defender's hand on his elbow. Tessa wasn't there. She was serving her own 18 months in minimum security. "Mr. Creed?" Judge Holcomb's voice could have frozen hell. "You targeted vulnerable widows during their darkest hours. You weaponized their grief for profit. You assaulted Ms. Hale when she discovered your theft. You showed no remorse during these proceedings." Wallace's jaw worked, but he stayed silent. "This court sentences you to 15 years for grand theft, 5 years for assault, 10 years for fraud, and 5 years for conspiracy. Sentences to run consecutively, total term, 35 years, with possibility of parole after 20. The gavel came down like thunder. Wallace exploded. "This is a setup! That bitch—" "Bailiff!" Judge Holcomb's voice cracked like a whip. "Remove the defendant." As they dragged him out, Wallace twisted to glare at me. "You destroyed my life." "No," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You destroyed it yourself, tick by tick." The courtroom erupted. Reporters pushed forward. The other widows hugged each other. Mom wept openly, relief, regret. release all mixed together. Outside, Martin Keene waited by the courthouse steps. "There's more good news. The forensic accounting is complete. We've recovered nearly everything Wallace stole from your mother. The house is safe. Her savings are being restored." "What about the other victims?" "The prosecutor is using Wallace's conviction to pursue restitution. Margaret Russo should recover most of her losses. The others, we'll do what we can." I pulled out the watch, checking the time. 3:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, I had an appointment at First National Bank. "Go," Martin said, smiling. "Your father waited a long time for this moment." At the bank, the manager herself handled the transaction. With the watch and the authenticated numbers, the trust's full contents were finally accessible. Not just the investment accounts, those had been transferred weeks ago, but a safety deposit box Dad had linked to the trust. Inside, along with stock certificates and bonds, was a letter. "My dear Nora, if you're reading this, then you've solved my last puzzle. I'm proud of you. The money is yours, for the life you want to build, not the one others expect of you. But the real gift isn't in these accounts. It's in what you've learned getting here. You've learned to fight for what's right, to stand up to bullies, to trust the truth even when others deny it. These skills will serve you better than any inheritance. The watch was your grandfather's, and his father's before him. Each generation has used it to mark not just time, but moments of courage. Your moment came when you refused to let it go. Every tick is a choice. Sweetheart, you've chosen well. All my love, Dad." I sat in that private room, letter in hand, watched ticking on the table, and cried. Not from sadness, but from completion. The circle was closed. Justice was served. Back home, my new home, a bright apartment near the hospital, I hung Dad's letter above my desk. The watch sat in a place of honor, still keeping perfect time. Mom visited that evening, bringing dinner and hesitant conversation. We were rebuilding slowly. Trust broken, but not beyond repair. She'd started therapy, confronting how grief had made her vulnerable to predators like Wallace. "I should have believed you," she said over coffee. "About the watch, about Wallace, about all of it. He was a professional manipulator. Mom, he knew exactly which buttons to push. Still," she touched the watch gently, "your father would be proud of how you fought, how you won." "We won," I corrected. "All of us Wallace hurt. We stopped him together." The next morning, I returned to work at Cypress Glen. My colleagues had followed the trial. Of course. Dr. Winters hugged me in the break room. "So what now?" she asked. "Back to investigating hospital compliance violations?" I thought about it. The trust money meant I didn't need to work. I could travel, retire early, pursue any dream. But Dad's letter echoed. The skills I'd learned were worth more than money. "Actually," I said, "I'm thinking about a change. The prosecutor mentioned they need investigators specializing in elder financial abuse, people who understand both medical and financial compliance." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's perfect for you." It was within a month. I joined the Elder Justice Task Force, using everything I'd learned, as a nurse, an investigator, and as Wallace's victim, to protect others. My first case was a retirement home administrator draining residents' accounts. My second was a fake charity targeting grieving spouses. Each investigation felt like completing another circle, honoring Dad's memory by protecting the vulnerable. 6 months later, Margaret Russo called. "Did you see the news? Wallace died in prison. Heart attack." I hadn't seen it, didn't need to. Wallace Creed had ceased to matter the moment those handcuffs clicked. He was already history, a cautionary tale, a tick mark in the lost column of justice served. That night, I wound Dad's watch, listening to its steady rhythm, every tick a choice, every choice a chance to do right. Wallace had heard that ticking as judgment, as time running out. I heard it as promise, time to build, to protect, to honor those who came before by serving those who needed help now. The watch had opened more than time, more than trust funds. More than hidden compartments, it had opened a purpose. And that was the greatest inheritance of all. The gavel came down one final time, but this wasn't in a courtroom. This was at an auction house in Cleveland, 3 years after Wallace's conviction. Sold! The auctioneer pointed to my paddle. 19th century Patek Philippe pocket watch, to bidder number 47. I smiled, adding another recovered heirloom to my collection. Not for me, for Eleanor Vance, whose late husband's watch had been sold by her nephew while she was in hospice care. My work with the Elder Justice Task Force had taught me that returning stolen legacies mattered as much as prosecuting the thieves. Ms. Hale? A young woman approached as I completed the paperwork. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 6. We're doing a follow-up on the Widow Hunter case. Could we ask you a few questions? I considered, then nodded. The more people knew about these predators, the better protected they'd be. Under the studio lights later, Jennifer leaned forward. It's been 3 years since Wallace Creed's conviction. How has your life changed? I found my purpose, I said simply. Last year alone, our task force recovered $12 million in stolen assets from elder fraud cases. Every case starts the same way. Someone notices something wrong and decides to fight back. You've become quite the advocate. The Hale Protocol for investigating suspicious marriages is now standard procedure in 3 states. I touched Dad's watch in my pocket. My father used to say every tick is a choice. I choose to use what I learned to help others. Any regrets about how things ended with Wallace? None. He made his choices, tick by tick. He built his own prison. The fact that he died there, that's just time running out. After the interview, I drove to Northbridge Cemetery. Dad's headstone stood solid under the old oak. Fresh flowers from Mom's morning visit brightening the space. Hey, Dad. I pulled out the watch, winding it carefully. Helped another family today. Eleanor Vance. You would have liked her. Tough as nails. Just needed someone to believe her story. The watch ticked steadily in the quiet cemetery. I'd made peace with the past, found strength in the struggle, discovered purpose in the pain. My phone buzzed. A new case file from the prosecutor. Suspected financial manipulation at a nursing home. I saved it for Monday. Today was for remembering. Oh, and Mom's doing well, I continued. She's volunteering at the Widows Support Group, helping others spot the red flags. Turns out her experience with Wallace makes her uniquely qualified to protect others. A cardinal landed on Dad's headstone, chirping once before flying away. Some would call it a sign. I just called it fitting. Cardinals mate for life, protect their families, sound the alarm when predators approach. Standing to leave, I noticed a small envelope tucked against the headstone. Inside, a note. Ms. Hale, you don't know me, but you saved my grandmother from someone like Wallace. Thank you for showing us that justice isn't just possible. It's worth fighting for. A grateful family. I tucked the note into my wallet with the others. Dozens now. From families who'd found courage in our story to fight their own battles. Back in my car, I checked the task force database. 47 active investigations. Hundreds of vulnerable seniors who needed protection. Thousands of family heirlooms and life savings at risk from predators who thought grief made people weak. They were wrong. Grief had made me stronger. Loss had taught me to fight. And that watch, Dad's simple pocket watch, had opened more than time or trust funds. It had opened my eyes to a calling I never knew I was meant to answer. My phone rang. Another prosecutor, another case, another Wallace Creed thinking he could prey on the vulnerable. I smiled, starting the car. Elder Justice Task Force, Nora Hale speaking. Yes, I can meet with your witness tomorrow. Tell her to bring any documentation she has, and tell her the ticking she hears isn't time running out, it's justice catching up. I drove toward the sunset, Dad's watch keeping time in my pocket, every tick still a choice. And I'd keep choosing to fight, to protect, to remember that the best revenge isn't just winning your own battle. It's making sure no one else has to fight alone. Wallace thought he was stealing from the weak. Instead, he'd created a warrior, and that warrior had an army now, prosecutors, investigators, advocates, and survivors, all of us working together, all of us choosing justice with every tick of the clock. The watch had opened everything that mattered: truth, justice, purpose, and the knowledge that Dad's final gift wasn't money. It was the reminder that time isn't just something we keep. It's something we honor. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're hearing this. Please leave a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Your stories and experiences matter too.